Hello and welcome to In Taiwan We Speak. My name is Alexander Shin, and today in Taiwan we speak Siraya. In the following three-part series, we'll be talking about Siraya and the so-called Plains Indigenous Peoples of Taiwan, also known as Pingpu peoples. It is a larger category of indigenous ethnic groups whose homelands are located in the more accessible plain areas of Taiwan's western coast. It is due to this accessibility that Pingpu peoples have historically faced assimilation and cultural loss to a much greater extent than the indigenous peoples living in the mountains. As a result, Pingpu peoples are still struggling to preserve their languages and cultures and have largely not been able to gain official recognition from the Taiwanese government. And to talk about the Siraya people and Pingpu people in general, we're joined today by Jolan Hsieh, or Bavaragh Dagalomai, an advocate for the Siraya people's rights and a professor at the Department of Ethnic Relations and Cultures at the National Dong Hwa University in Hualien. Greetings, Professor Hsieh, and thank you so much for joining me here.
Taipei imuni Mariang waki di Bavaragh Dagalomai. Hello, my name is Jolan Hsieh. Bavaragh Dagalomai is my Siraya name. Bavaragh meaning sunrise, before sunrise, and Dagalomai is my family name from my mom's side.
Were you born with this name?
No, not really, because at the time we already, pretty much in Mandarin Chinese name only, and I think that is very common for all the indigenous people. But it's just recently, we began to say, hey, we want to have our own name. So it's so easy to take family name because we still have a record on our family name. But for our name, we have a name list for girls and for boys. And then my name was actually from Ami's name.
Oh.
My Ami's name is Nigar, and that is from my adopting Ami's family. So they named me that. The reason is because I got up early before sunrise, and then that also means this woman is a very hardworking woman. Oh. So I think that is a good name. So I want to see myself as a hardworking woman, and I also like to make the connection with my Amis side of a family because I live in the eastern part of the Taiwan, and then I have good relations with Amis family. So that's the reason.
Speaking about family roots, in one of your interviews, you mentioned that in the Siraya traditional society, the matrilineal social structure is very important. Could you please share more about that?
My grandfather was kind of marrying to my grandmother, and that is very common in our culture. And then I grew up I always see my grandmom work outside the farmland and do all those work, make decisions, inherit the property. And that's pretty much the same pattern with my mom and my dad. Even though my mother's side is also plain indigenous, my father's side is from mainlander Fujian. So I see my mom's always very strong to take family responsibility and then to help a family. And so I have my childhood every summer and winter. I went back to my grandmom's home, and I always see that is with my aunties and everyone works hard, never shy to talk and then make decisions. When my grandmom passed away, we all inherit part of the property. Men and women, my uncle and my auntie and my mom, they all inherit equally, and that is based on the culture. And then I think that is very non-mainstream way, because even though in our civil law say that the daughters and sons have an equal right to get the property, but most of the daughters will give that up, or the boys they will say, hey, you're already married and you shouldn't inherit some. So we have that kind of tradition still. And so we just inherited the property, but also we have the duties to carry on some of the family responsibility and then to make decision and to taking care of our brothers and sisters. So that is quite different.
And this kind of social structure, is it unique to Siraya, or does it also happen in other indigenous peoples groups?
Okay, so that is maybe unique to Siraya, but at the same time, like I mentioned before, because I have a more connection and close to Amis people. So Amis is also matrilineal society. So when you see that men and women, they share different responsibilities, but it's pretty much the women's make decision at home. And in public, probably men feel like, they say words and do something, but when they go home, if the family wife or daughter say, hey, this is not right and everything, next day the men go back to the public and say, hey, I have a different idea, so I want to change this. So it's pretty much, we all joke about Siraya or Amis people as a matrilineal society, and the menu looks like a head, but we are the neck to make the men to turn left or turn right.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. And then also like for Taiwan people, that is, we call it equal right, because their firstborn child, man or woman, they take the responsibility and to inherit the property. So I think in indigenous culture, we are very diverse. And then what I really like about that, because we are not all patrilineal, and then some of our matrilineal, but we are not matriarchy at all, because we share responsibilities.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting component of culture, given that non-indigenous societies here are mostly patriarchal.
Right. Yeah.
Could you please tell us more about the Siraya nation that you represent?
Like I said, Siraya people are more like a matrilineal society. And then we are pretty much spread out in like western south area. So it's pretty much in from Chiayi and then Tainan and then Pingtung area. Or even in Taipei, this area, we have a Dagalomai people. It's not Siraya by plain indigenous, but Siraya pretty much in south, west area of Taiwan. Where I come from in Tainan County. And our whole village, our whole community are Siraya people. And that is one of the very earliest being converted into Christianity when James Maxwell from England do his missionary in Taiwan, in Tainan city, and then being mainstream Han people didn't really like him. So he was being introduced to the Siraya village, because I think of Siraya people is easier to accept the gospel. So our church has like more than 150 years old. One of a very old Siraya, or they call Pingpu church in Taiwan. Yes. So that's our people. And then we also, in Tainan, we have an archaeology museum there. So our friends always say that our ancestors really know how to eat good food, because our body size is huge. It's all our ancestors, Siraya ancestor. We don't really eat red meat. And then we always have a good protein like a fish, because we close to the coast. So from the archaeology side, they digging out all those bones and then say, oh my gosh, your ancestors really tall, and then, it's very strong. And why right now it's like this, and we always joke about, because we have a different interracial marriage throughout the different historic time, so that change our gene.
I see. So would it be correct to say that the Siraya people were the first people inhabiting the areas of Tainan and the vicinity?
I would say that it's the earliest to claim that it's the homeland.
I would like to talk about Tainan and the Siraya homeland. This year, Tainan will celebrate the 400 years anniversary since its foundation. And this, from what I hear, is going to be a major celebration of the oldest city in Taiwan, basically. Are you going to join the celebrations as well?
Well, that is a tough question, because from Siraya perspective, of course, Tainan is never just 400 years old. So that is pretty much from the mainstream, and then they don't really see us already exist here, right? So that's the same thing, like people always say Taiwan only have 400 years of history. So in indigenous, we don't like that. But at the same time, if we don't get positive intervene, then they are going to twist more.
Right.
So some of our Siraya people trying to get more involved and try to get more of our perspective in these preparations. So, for example, like in Tainan City's Indigenous Affairs, Bureau of Indigenous Affairs, they have participate in the celebrations, and then they will bring more like a Siraya or indigenous perspective into that part of the event.
Are you hopeful that there's going to be more representation of the pre-Dutch history of the Siraya people in the celebration?
Yes, of course, because, once we have more united together and then to have a voice out and voice of, our own Siraya perspective, and then I think the Tainan city government and then whoever who are in the preparation committee, they will listen to.
To what extent has the community preserved its identity, culture, language?
I can only speak some of the Siraya tribal community like I have, close contact. So for example, like in mine, it's a Gangling, Gongana tribal communities. We have a very strong Christianity connection, but at the same time, we still have people do the traditional worship to our alit, our god or goddess or ancestors. In the past 10 years, because the movement in Tainan trying to push to recognize our Siraya peoples. So we have encouraged the people to register, but originally that the government do not allow us to register and close the gate for us to do registration as indigenous peoples. And Tainan City under Lai Qingde as a mayor tried to reopen the door and to say that we can register as other and to indicate that we have an ancestor as a Siraya people.
When was it? Sorry.
So it's under the Vice President Lai's as a mayor in Tainan. So that was about 10 years ago.
Right.
The number not really increased at all because many people thought about, okay, so we registered and then we're not really being recognized as indigenous. So what is that for, right? So many people will think, okay, so self-identify yourself as indigenous is very important. But other people feel like, okay, so if you have a government to identify you and to know who are indigenous, and that is easier to allocate resources, funding. So that is why you never really push to know how many indigenous or how many Siraya people in Tainan County or Tainan City. But the government trying to do estimate and ask scholars to do that by pull out Japanese household registers. So they say, okay, so you have Siraya people in this area, and then they calculate, so how many sibling or the offspring you have, and then true right now, so they come up with a huge number. And that is under assumption that all the Siraya people, they all have offspring, and then they're all being widely recognized as indigenous peoples. But in realities, the current 16 indigenous being recognized by government never be that easy, right? So it used to be once you have an interracial marriage, then the woman married out and then you lost your status as indigenous peoples. And if you want to regain your status, you needed to go through the claim that you have the ancestors line and then to prove that. And that is hard to prove sometimes. So they have like a wide open door to say, hey, we have so many Siraya population, and then the whole Pingpu people, it's like over 800,000. And that is more than the current indigenous populations, which is ridiculous. And then the reason is that because we feel that is because they don't really want us to being recognized as indigenous, so they want to use the number to scale out the current recognized indigenous people and then say, hey, there's a group of people not coming to join the fight or the fight against the governments or the colonizers' injustice, wrongdoing. But they are coming here to share part of the resources. And I think that is the strategy for many, many different countries' government, because for them that the indigenous people, in a way, it sounds like a good thing for diverse culture, but at the same time, it's always being seen as a problem. Right. So that is a kind of a smart strategy to do that. But I think many officials recognize the indigenous peoples know that trick, so they don't really buy into that. And our Siraya people aware about that, so we try hard to preserve our languages, so we learn our languages. And more indigenous community of Siraya people or other Pingpu people trying to revitalize our cultural practice as well. So even the artwork, the ceremonial thing, and language revitalization is all part of that to create sense of identity and then the belonging, and then that go along with the political movement to, in terms of claim the indigenous status and rights.
Well, on that note, that's the end of our time for today. Join us next week as we continue our conversation with Professor Jolan Hsieh about the Siraya language. Thank you, Professor Hsieh, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Oleg, and this was In Taiwan We Speak, your audio guide to Taiwan's mind-blowing linguistic diversity. See you next week.